They called her soft. Just a medic. Not a soldier, not a leader, not someone you'd follow into war. But when the sky turned red, when every commander was burned to ash, when the outpost was falling apart, she didn't run. She stood up, took command, and changed the fate of an entire world. No one expected what she did next. And by the end of it all, they were calling her something else entirely. But before that happened, she had to survive the impossible. Asterisk, she was never meant to lead an army. She was never meant to hold a weapon. She was just the medic. But when the sky exploded, when every officer vanished in fire, when no one was left to give orders, she didn't freeze. She didn't run. She moved. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why her name is written on the walls of history. But first, you need to see how it all began. Because when the bombs fell, only one person stood between survival and complete extinction. Her name, it was Elira Tran. Elira stood quietly at the edge of the training yard on Outpost Rylos-9, a dusty steel platform orbiting the fractured moon of Koroks. The others were running drills, aggressive, loud, overly proud, mostly alien officers, tall, armored, voices like thunder. Her human frame barely reached their shoulders. They never passed her a weapon, never included her in strategy briefings. She was a patcher, a stretcher carrier, background blur in their war stories. Leave the soft one in the medbay. She once overheard a Zarn officer grumble. Humans break to icely anyway. She didn't argue. She had learned early. Silence got her farther than protest. So she watched, learned, listened. Every injury, every pattern, every mistake. That morning was the same as always. Tension in the air, rumors of enemy movement, nothing new. The officers barked orders for show, not because they believed anything was coming. Elira was restocking bandages, prepping med gel, checking her scanner, which was quietly beeping with a background radiation rise. Her breath caught. That number wasn't right. Not for this sector. Not for this time. She looked up. The sky outside the force field shimmered red. No sirens yet. No alerts. Just silence. And then the sky broke open. The first impact didn't sound like an explosion. It sounded like a scream. Metal twisted in 1,000 directions. Walls peeled like foil. The force field shattered as a glowing spear of plasma slammed into the command tower above. Fire rained sideways. A second blast took out the barracks. The third hit the hangar. Elira was thrown backward, crashing into a supply crate. Her vision spun, ears ringing, then silence again. No orders, no shouting, just smoke. And the smell of burnt metal. And the distant sound of someone choking on blood. She crawled to her feet. The ceiling above the medbay was half gone. She looked around. Bodies. Everywhere. One arm twitched. She moved. She found a Zarn lieutenant with a jagged spike through his thigh. Eyes wide, bleeding out. She pressed her knee to his leg, snapped a clot stem capsule, and jabbed it into the artery. He screamed. "Hold still," she whispered. Another figure limped into view. A Yaren pilot face burnt. She helped him down, tied his arm, gave him a breath stick. No time for full care. Another body, dead. Another screaming. She moved faster. 3 more stabilized. 2 gone. She checked comms. Static. Tried the base network. Dead. No chain of command. No signals. No backup. She stood up straight. For the first time realized what had actually happened. There was no one else. No officers. No leaders. No leaders. No. One left to make decisions. Just survivors. Bleeding, coughing, dazed, looking at her. One of them, a young recruit, maybe 18, spoke. "What do we do?" Elira's throat was dry. Her hands were still shaking. Her voice came out clear. "Help me move the injured. We need a safe zone, somewhere with cover." "But the enemy, they're not here yet," she said, sharper now. "They're watching, waiting for cleanup. That gives us time." The recruit nodded and followed. Soon others joined. Not because she had rank, but because she was moving. And in that moment, movement meant leadership. She led them through the wreckage. The barracks were gone, but the sub-storage bay was still intact. No windows, reinforced walls, air filtration. It would hold. They carried who they could, dragged stretchers, used what remained of med gel and pain patches. One soldier cried. Another passed out. Elira kept going. She didn't stop. Couldn't not until the last survivor was inside. She sealed the hatch, collapsed against the door, and let herself breathe. Only for a second. She turned back. Already some were looking at her differently. Like she wasn't just the medic anymore. She didn't like the feeling. She wanted to sit, to cry, to be invisible again. But then a wounded Krav soldier asked, "What now?" And someone else added, "They'll come again, won't they?" Elira nodded slowly. Yes, they will. The lights flickered. The generators wouldn't last long. She looked at what they had: less than 50 survivors, maybe 15 capable of fighting, half of them barely standing. Weapons, scattered, supplies, low, food and water, enough for maybe 3 days. There was no help coming. She knew that deep down, no command, no signal, no evacuation, just them. Then she remembered the command deck. Maybe something had survived up there. Comes gear, maps, anything. She stood again. "I'm going back up," she said. "No way," one shouted. "You'll die out there." Maybe she said, "But if I don't, we all die in here." No one stopped her. She climbed the wreckage of what used to be the main corridor, boots crunching over debris and melted panels. The air was thicker, now smoke and scorched insulation. People who never looked at her twice before today. At the top of the steps, she found what remained of the command center. Shattered walls, burned screens. A half-buried console flickering with sparks. The massive tactical map table split down the middle. Like someone had punched a hole through the planet itself. She approached it. Paused. This was where they made decisions. The real ones. They had stood. Tall. Confident. Always assuming. Humans like her were there to patch their wounds, not tell them what to do. But they weren't here now. Only her. She reached out, touched the cracked table, and slowly pulled the map interface online. A flickering projection showed troop movements, enemy scans, supply routes. It was a mess, but it worked. Behind her, a wind howled through the broken ceiling. Elira stood there, alone, facing the war. No orders, no backup, only a choice. She didn't speak out loud, but in her mind it was clear: if no one else will lead, then I will. And with that, the medic stepped into the role no one expected. Command. But what she didn't know was that the enemy had already seen her take the table and marked her as target. Number 1, Leah, did not sleep that night. She stayed in the command room trying to fix. Whatever system still worked, she had pulled power from a backup cell and managed to bring one console online. The map flickered, but gave her enough to see the full picture. They were alone, truly alone. The nearest friendly base was hundreds of kilometers away and surrounded by hostile territory. There was no chance of help coming, not now, not soon. Back in the storage bay, the survivors waited. Some were in pain, some were silent, all of them were scared. There was no food cooked, no water served, no comfort or warmth, only the knowledge that the enemy would come again, and this time they would finish the job. Elira returned to the group. Her face was covered in dirt and smoke, her voice calm but firm. "We need to build defenses," she said. "We have, maybe 6 hours before they strike again." "How do asked one of the older aliens. "Because that's what I would do," Elira answered. "They hit hard, then they wait. They scan, they expect fear and panic. They want us scattered. They will come at dawn, so we make it costly for Thema." Few looked uncertain. A medic giving battle orders was not something they expected or wanted, but no one else spoke, no one else stood, no one else had a plan. Elira gathered those who could still walk and move. She sent them in pairs to scavenge from the wreckage. Bring back anything that can shield a wall, weapons from the armory if still intact, and batteries for the turret mounts if we are lucky. They moved slowly but with purpose. The fear was still there, but it was now mixed with something else. Direction. Ella worked with her hands, rebuilding barricades from old crates, welding broken plates across the entrance, setting up trip alarms from medical sensors. She used surgical clamps to reroute power. She used hospital tools to repair gun triggers. She was not a soldier, but she was precise and focused as the night deepened. She checked the wounds of the injured, reassured them, talked them through pain. Most of the time, she just listened. She knew they needed more than treatment. They needed belief. Past the defenses took shape one by one. The scavengers returned with scraps, but also with news there. Was movement at the edge of the crater, lights shifting shapes. Scanning beams just out of range. They are close, said one. They are watching, said. And Elira gathered the group again. We hold the line here, she said. This is our ground. We are not trained for this. We are not ready, but we have one advantage. We know the layout. We know the angles. We know pain and how to survive it. Someone asked quietly, what if we can't stop them then? We slow them, she answered, and make sure someone escapes to tell the others, though. Group nodded, some with doubt, but most with something growing inside. Elira took one final walk through the defenses, checking every line, every angle she had drawn, firing paths on the floor, set fallback points, marked med zones with glowing tape. If we fall together, she told them. No one gets left behind. The last hour before dawn was the quietest. No one spoke, no one slept. They just waited, breathing in the stale air, gripping their weapons, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the barricadisla. Sat near the entrance with a small medical scanner in one hand and a plasma pistol in the other. She had never fired one before, not in combat, but her hands were steady then, just as she predicted the first shadow move day. Figures slid across the rubble, silent and fast, followed by another, and another, red armor gleaming in the dim light there. Here someone whispered. Araya raised her hand, waited until the first enemy crossed the trip beam, and shouted. Now a wall of light burst from their side. The makeshift turrets opened fire, guided by her hand-drawn code. Hidden charges exploded, slowing. The enemy wave. The aliens fought back, but the narrow corridor and Elira's traps forced them to break formation. Her defenders fired in tight bursts, covering each other just like she trained. Then the first push was stopped. The second came harder. One of her own was hit. Elira ran to him in the open, dragged him. Back patched his shoulder under fire. A soldier watched and said, You're insane. No, she replied. I'm your medic now, hold that line. They fought for what felt like hours. Elira gave orders. Moved supplies, shifted positions. The enemy was stronger, but she had made them smarter and more united. Finally, as the sun cracked over the shattered horizon, the attackers pulled back. Silence fell again. They had won not the war, but this fight, and they had done it with a medic in command. Elira stood in the ruined hallway, covered in dust and blood, exhausted but alive. The others gathered around her, looking at her, not with pity, not with doubt, but with respect. You gave us a chance, said the young recruit from before. You gave us more than Elira didn't answer. She just looked at the burning sky and whispered, We hold here. But next time we strike first, would you like me to continue with part 3? Now Elira stood quietly at the edge of the ruined hallway, her eyes scanning the ground where bodies lay twisted and broken. Her people had survived the night, but it had cost them pain, energy, and precious time. She knew this was only the beginning. The enemy had tested them, now they would come in force. Inside the shelter, the mood was mixed. Some were proud of what they had done. Others were shaken. Many had never fired a weapon before last night. Many had never thought they would fight for their lives with a medic calling the shots. Elira walked through the survivors, checking wounds, giving water, listening to every word. She spoke little, only what was needed. Every moment was important. Every breath was preparation. Some of the alien soldiers began to question their position. One of them stepped forward, a tall, red-skinned warrior with a cracked shoulder plate, and said, We cannot hold another wave. We should retreat now while we can. We know the tunnels beneath the outpost. We can escape into the mines and disappear. Elira looked at him for a long second, then at the others. Watching, the group was split, tired, scared. Some were ready to follow his voice and runneth. We run, she said calmly. They will track us through the mines. We will lose the wounded. We will be hunted, picked off one by one, and we will die without a fight. Another voice spoke, But we cannot win against them. Elira nodded slowly, then pointed to the cracked command console on the floor. I saw something last night. They are not sending full forces. They are scanning. They are watching us. They do not know who is leading us yet, and that means we have a chance. Silence filled the room. Everyone listened. I need a small team. She said, brave fast, willing to follow me into the hills. We are going to hit back. Group murmured, confused. Why attack? Why Nobi? Because we need to show them this outpost is not weak. And because I saw a supply beacon near the ridge. Something was dropped. It might have weapons or intel or something we can use. For stepped forward. Without a word to aliens, one human, one half-robot scout Elira nodded and gathered gear for the trip. They left before noon, climbing through broken vents and rocky paths. Moving silently through smoke and ash, the ground outside the outpost was cracked, and glowing the sky above, still dark from the fires of the bad Elira, led them with quiet focus, checking her scanner, watching movement, keeping low at every shadow. They moved for hours, until they reached the edge of a ridge where the metal floor gave way to sharp stone and twisted roots. There it was, a drop pod, scorched and half buried in the dirt, surrounded by broken trees and heat burns. They approached carefully, weapons ready, but the area was quiet. To quiet, Elira opened the hatch and her heart stopped. Inside were supply crates, yes, but also something else. A black data core marked with the emblem of Central Command and a warning tag. Labeled classified eyes only. High Command. She turned it over and saw something that made her blood run cold. A set of coordinates and a field note with a single line. Outpost Rylos-9 marked for abandonment. Retrieve only if high-value assets remain. Meaning hit her hard. They had been left behind on purpose. She looked at her team but said nothing. Not yet. They gathered what they could. Ammo, energy packs, a broken drone part, and the data core, then started back toward the outpost. Halfway there, a sensor flashed red. Enemy scout incoming. They hid behind rocks, holding their breath. A flying drone passed above, then a small enemy unit, 6 soldiers armored, scanning the area. Elira signaled wait, then threw a sound decoy to the left. The enemies turned, fired at the noise, and her team moved fast. They took down 2 with quick fire. Another fell to the scout's hidden blade, but one of the aliens was hit in the leg. Elira dragged him with help from the robot, and they pushed back to the outpost just as night began to fall again inside. The survivors rushed to help. Elira handed off the wounded, gave the supplies to the quartermaster, and kept the data core in her pack. She gathered the senior fighters and laid out a map. They will strike again tonight, but now we strike first. We use the tunnels. We move in. 2 teams, one hits the ridge from below, the other draws their attention from above. They looked at her surprised, not because of her plan, but because they now trusted her. Without question, you really think we can take them by surprise? One Elira placed a broken officer badge on the table and said, they think we are still hiding, that we are scared, that we are waiting for rescue. They are wrong. She stood and gave the final order quietly, but firmly. Tonight we become the Stormwood. Like me to continue with part 4 now? The sky above Outpost Rylos-9 was dark and quiet, but Elira knew it would not stay that way for long. The enemy was regrouping and would come back stronger. They had to move before that happened. Every second was precious. Every step had to count. She had no time for doubt. The survivors were tired but ready. They had followed her through fire, through fear. And now they were ready to fight, not because they had to, but because they believed in her. Elira stood with her small strike team in the lower tunnels. She had split them into 2 groups. One would stay at the outpost and make noise, fake power signals, fire warning shots, and confuse the scanners. The second team, hers, would move through the tunnels and attack from behind the enemy ridge camp. They had 1 shot to make it count. The tunnel was old, half collapsed, and full of dust. She walked carefully, watching for traps, checking motion on her scanner. Every movement echoed through the narrow space behind her. The others followed in silence, only the sound of gear shifting and quiet breathing. After an hour, they reached a ventilation shaft that opened to the surface. Elira climbed up first, peeking through the broken grid. What she saw made her stop. The enemy had built a forward camp on the ridge, armored tents, heavy cannons to scanning towers, and a command relay dish in the center. Soldiers moved in patrols, weapons ready, relaxed, confident. They did not expect anyone to strike them. Elira whispered instructions to the team. Spread out, hit the towers first, cut the scanners, then destroy the relay. We need to blind them before the main strike. They waited until the signal from the outpost came. Flashes of light on the far side, fake explosions meant to draw attention. The enemy turned their focus toward the noise, and that was when Elira's team moved fast, silent like shadows. They took out the first tower with a charge planted on its base.
Oh?
The explosion shook the ground. The second tower fell under plasma shots. and grenades. Then they ran for the relay, but that was when everything changed. From behind a wall, two enemy guards jumped out and opened fire. One of Elira's team was hit, another thrown. Back by shockwaves, Elira ducked behind cover, dragged the wounded. With her and returned fire with short, quick bursts, she reached the relay dish and climbed the support frame with the data core in her bag. She slammed it into the port and activated a virus program. It would overload their systems, send false signals, and shut down targeting protocols. Screen blinked red, then green. The relay sparked and died, but it was not over enemy. Backup was coming from the far side of the ridge, heavy troops with shields and drones. Elira knew they could not win a long fight. Not here, not like this. She gave the fallback signal, and the team started retreating one by one, covering each other. Elira stayed last, sending one more overload, burst into the enemy radar before sliding down the ridge with smoke rising behind her. They ran through the tunnel, chased by noise and fire, but reached the outpost just as the second team started phase 2 of the planned mortar shots and fake power spikes, created the illusion of a larger force inside the bunker. Elira collapsed against the wall, breathing hard, her hands shaking, her ears ringing, but the others cheered not for victory but for what they had done. They had struck first, they had fought back, and they had made the enemy bleed later. That night, Elira sat alone in the medbay. Holding the data core in her hands, she had not told anyone what she saw inside. Not yet. The message from Central Command still played in her mind, cold and clear. Unit deemed non-essential resources not allocated for rescue. Terminate equipment if retrieval not viable. It was a betrayal, one that cut deeper than any wound she had treated. She looked around at the sleeping soldiers. The wounded, the young recruit still clutching his rifle even in sleep. They were not non-essential. They were her responsibility. And now her mission. She made a quiet promise to herself. As the fires outside dimmed and the base went silent, she would not wait for rescue. She would not hope for help. They would fight, they would hold, and if needed, they would bring the war to the ones who left them behind. Would you like me to continue with part 5 now? The outpost was quiet again, but Elira could feel the pressure building. The enemy had lost their scanners and relay dish. Their forward camp was in ruins, but they would return soon, and this time they would not hold back. They would bring full force, heavy weapons, and no mercy. Elira stood over the command table, studying the map carefully. Her hands moved quickly, marking positions, drawing attack paths, checking power reserves, and supply levels. The virus she planted in the enemy relay gave them a short window of confusion. Now they had one chance to strike before the enemy regrouped. She had only one artillery shell left, a single shot from the old cannon buried beneath the outpost. It was damaged, barely operational, but if aimed right, it could make a difference. It could break the enemy before they reached the base again. The problem was they did not know where the main enemy command post was hidden. Not exactly. Only a few signals remained on the map, and they had to choose. Elira called the senior fighters into the main room and explained the plan. They would use scouts to confirm one of the enemy signal points, while the cannon was repaired. Once the scouts returned with confirmation, they would fire the shot. If they were wrong, the cannon would be gone, and the enemy would come in full strength. Some hesitated, some doubted the scouts might not come back in time, or might choose the wrong location. Was a risk, but Elira's voice was clear and steady. We have one shot and one shot only. We take it or we wait to die. Scouts left just before dawn, 2 teams moving through the cracked surface to reach the hills beyond the ridge. Elira stayed behind and worked with the engineers to fix the cannon. It was old and rusted, half burned from the first attack. They used scrap to replace parts, used cooling gel to patch wires, and powered it with a backup cell meant for medical equipment towers. Passed with no word from the scouts. Tension rose. People waited in silence, eyes fixed on the screens, weapons ready. Then the first signal came, a short pulse from one scout team, followed by a second. Both confirmed the same target, a deep signal bunker hidden beneath the enemy camp 20 clicks east of their position. Elira did not waste time. She locked the cannon on the target, used her hand to guide the stabilizer, and calibrated wind speed and gravity. Shift. She checked everything twice, then gave the order. The cannon fired with a deafening roar. The ground shook. The blast lit the sky like lightning, then faded into silence. No one spoke. They waited, eyes on the sensors. Hearts pounding. Minutes passed. Then one screen blinked enemy signal. Lost confirmed smoke, detected in target area command node. Down the room erupted in quiet cheers. Not loud, not wild, but strong and full of hope. They had done it, but the victory was not clean. Elira knew they had revealed their hand. The enemy now knew. Someone clever was leading the survivors, not just a scattered group hiding in ruins, but a force that could fight and plan. Later that evening, Elira checked on the scouts. Only one team. Turned one scout was injured, carried by his teammate. They had run into enemy drones during their escape and barely made it back. Elira treated his wounds with steady hands, but inside, she felt the cost of every choice, the price of every victory. The enemy would not forgive this strike. They would come again. And soon Elira sat alone near the edge of the outpost wall, watching the sunset burn across the sky. Her body was tired, her mind heavy. She thought of the message from command again, how they had been left behind, marked unimportant, abandoned, without warning. She closed her eyes and whispered to herself, "They thought we would break." They thought wrong. Behind her, footsteps approached. It was the young recruit again. The same one who had followed her from the first day. He looked stronger now. Eyes clear, jaw firm. He handed her a ration bar and sat beside her, aware. "Ready for whatever comes next," he said simply. Elira looked at him and nodded, not because she was sure, not because she had no fear, but because she had made a choice long ago. Would fight, they would survive, and they would make sure the galaxy remembered the day. Medic led the charge. "Would you like me to continue with part 6 now?" The enemy came at night without warning. No signals, no scanning beams, just silence, followed by shadows moving through the ash. Their footsteps were soft but heavy. Their formation tight. They had learned from the last fight, and they came with a new purpose. They were not here to scare or capture. They were here to end everything. Elira was in the lower medbay checking inventory when the alert came, a quiet pulse from the outer sensors. It was not loud but urgent. She dropped the supply crate and ran to the command room. The screens were flickering with movement, too many signatures, too fast. They had bypassed the outer alarms. They were already inside the perimeter. Shay grabbed her weapon and shouted, "Orders, fall back to Corridor 3, seal the north wall, set traps behind the doors, tell the injured to stay below, and keep silent this time." There was no time for speeches or plans, only action and instinct. Her fighters moved quickly, responding like a real unit, no hesitation, no confusion. They followed her voice even as the walls shook from explosions above. Then came the mistake. During the retreat, a support beam collapsed, blocking the second tunnel. 2 soldiers were trapped on the other side. Elira turned to help, but before she could reach them, a stun blast hit the floor near her feet. She looked up and saw red armored enemy troops storming through the breach, smoke behind them. Weapons raised, voices cold and mechanical. She was hit from behind. Something sharp struck her shoulder. Then everything spun. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and the floor rushed up to meet her. When she awoke, the air was cold and full of static. Her hands were bound, her legs weak, and her armor gone. Oh, she was inside a metal chamber deep underground. Surrounded by enemy tech, glowing blue lines ran across the walls. She was not alone. A figure stood near the console, back-turned armor, tall and dark, with a strange symbol etched into the plates. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face she did not expect. Human, not fully, but close enough. Sharp eyes, thin mouth, voice smooth and mocking. "So this is the medic everyone keeps talking about, the one who broke our scanners and destroyed our camp. Not bad for someone trained to stop bleeding instead of cause." Elira said nothing, just watched and waited, her mind scanning for details. Layout, weapons, cameras, anything useful. The man walked closer and crouched beside her. "You know, you could have stayed in your bunker, waited to be crushed like the rest of your kind. Instead, you stood up and pretended to lead. Brave, maybe foolish, definitely." She finally spoke. "You are wasting your time." "I am not going to tell you anything," he smiled. "That is fine. I already have what I need. But I am curious one thing. How did you get those coordinates to strike our command center? That shot was too precise for a guess." "Someone helped you." "Did they?" Elira stayed quiet. The truth was, no one helped her. She had figured it out alone by reading signal decay and heat trails. Using nothing but logic and a medic's eye for detail, he sighed and stood again, pressing a button on his wrist. The wall opened, showing a view of the outside battlefield from above flame smoke running figures. Then he said something that made her blood freeze. "We are going to wipe the outpost by morning. We have the firepower now, and no need to wait anymore. You are the last obstacle. Once you are gone, the rest will fall." She knew she had to move now, not later, not after more talking. She shifted slightly, testing the binds loose enough, on the left side, tight on the right. She remembered the blade hidden in her boot still there, unnoticed. She waited until he turned his back, then dropped the blade into her hand, and cut the rope fast and quiet. The moment it slipped free, she lunged forward, slammed the blade into the side of his leg, and grabbed his shock baton. He shouted, fell backward. She hit the door control and ran out, alarms blaring behind her, red lights flashing. Footsteps chasing her down narrow metal halls. Elira did not stop. She pushed past guards, ducked under beams, climbed through vents. She ran until she reached a supply room, found her gear, and patched her shoulder quickly, pain burning every move. She was not done, not yet. She had escaped, but now came the harder part. She had seen the enemy weapon platform, the one hidden under the hill. It was massive, glowing with unstable energy, and pointed directly at her. People land now. She knew what she had to do. "Would you like me to continue with part 7 now, Elira?" "No." Moved through the tunnels with her heart pounding and her breath sharp. Every step was a fight against pain. Her shoulder throbbed with every movement, but her mind was clear. Focus. She had seen the enemy weapon, the size of it, the energy it held, the target it had. Locked. The outpost had hours, maybe less, and there was no one else who knew what was coming. She reached the surface just before dawn. The light was weak, filtered through smoke and ash. The land looked dead. Metal and fire twisted into shapes that once were walls and towers. Her boots crunched on debris as she crossed what remained of the northern ridge. Each step pulled her closer to the weapon's site. The platform was buried beneath an old mine structure, hidden by camouflage netting and energy shields. Most would have missed it, but not her. She had seen it from inside. The enemy control room, mapped its layout, memorized the rhythm of its charging cycles. Now she stood at the edge of it, watching soldiers load power cells and activate targeting node C. Had no army, no team, just a broken plasma rifle, a bag of stolen grenades, and the one thing the enemy never planned for: a medic who had stopped waiting for orders. She slid down the hill, using the smoke as cover, moving low and fast between support beams and storage crates. She counted guards, scanned motion paths, and reached the lower level unseen. The heat was rising, steam pouring from vents. The weapon was almost ready. She climbed to the control deck, saw the targeting screen locked onto her outpost, a timer counting down 60 minutes to fire. The enemy believed they were safe, that she was captured or dead. They had no idea she was already inside their most guarded weapon. She moved quickly, planted charges on fuel lines, placed pulse grenades under the control deck. Every step calculated, every second closer to discovery. She knew she would not get a second chance. Footsteps echoed above her, voices shouting in a language she barely understood. They had found the broken gate, the empty restraints. They knew she was gone, and they were looking. Elira reached the core chamber, a glowing pit of unstable energy humming with violent rhythm. She pulled the last explosive from her bag and placed it directly on the cooling unit. If this thing overloaded, it would not just shut down, it would take the entire ridge with ITI. Turned to leave, but stopped. Something felt wrong. Too quiet, no alarms, no response. Then she heard it, a soft click behind her, and turned slowly. The same enemy commander stood in the doorway. Weapon-aimed eyes, cold and furious. He stepped inside, shaking his head. "I should have ended you the moment you stepped onto my screen, but I was curious. I wanted to see what made you different." Elira stayed still. Hands raised, voice steady. "You want to know what makes me different? I am not trying to win a war. I am trying to save the people you left to die." He laughed low and bitter. "Save them? You will kill them all with what you have done. You overloaded a weapon. You do not understand. It will detonate everything for miles, including your precious outpost." Elira looked him in the eye and said, "Then I better stop it before it fires." She threw a small EMP charge from her belt. It exploded with a flash, knocking the weapon from his hand. She rushed forward, tackled him to the ground, and fought with everything she had. Every strike full of pain and fire. Was stronger, but she was faster and desperate and not ready to die yet. The fight ended with him unconscious at her feet and blood on her hands. She tied him to a pipe, disabled the main trigger, and activated the override sequence to detonate only the core and bury the weapon in its own crater. It would not be clean, it would not be safe, but it would stop the blast from reaching the outpost. She set the timer for 5 minutes and ran limping through collapsing halls, chased by fire and heat. The mountain shook behind her metal, screamed as the weapon tore itself apart. She reached the surface just as the first explosion hit. The shockwave threw her into the dirt rocks. Raining down, sky split in orange light. Silence followed, then smoke, then nothing. When Elira opened her eyes, she was half buried in ash lungs, burning body broken but alive. She looked back and saw the weapon sight gone, vaporized and sealed by falling rock. The ridge was silent. The enemy weapon destroyed the outpost, safe for now. She closed her eyes again as rescue lights blinked on the horizon, not from command, not from central, but from her own people, who had come searching for her because they believed in her. Would you like me to continue with part 8 now? Elira woke to soft light and the quiet hum of a medical ship. Her body was wrapped in biofoam, her shoulder fully repaired, her breathing slow and steady. She tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pushed her back. It was the young recruit, now in full armor, eyes wide with relief. You made it back. We thought you were gone. We saw the ridge go up in flame, and then the signal went dead. She nodded slowly, voice weak but steady. The weapon is gone. They cannot strike us now. We are safe for a while. The ship was full of survivors, more than she expected, those she had saved, those who had fought beside her, those who had followed her not because of rank but because of trust. She saw the alien commander, who once called her soft, now standing near the window looking out with quiet respect. He gave her a sharp nod. No words, just silence and understanding. Later the door opened, and a senior officer from Central Command stepped in, flanked by guards. His uniform was perfect, his boots clean, his face unreadable. He looked at Elira and said, "You disobeyed protocols. You led unauthorized missions. You engaged in reckless combat and damaged valuable equipment." She met his gaze without fear. "I saved every life I could. I stopped a weapon that your reports never mentioned, and I fought when you left us behind." The officer said nothing for a long moment, then turned to leave. Before he did, he said, "Your record will be reviewed, your actions evaluated. We will contact you if needed." The door closed, and Elira leaned back against the bed, smiling slightly, not out of joy, but out of peace. She had not done this for medals or promotion. She had done it because no one else would. As the days passed, the story spread. A human medic who took command under fire, who turned survivors into soldiers, who destroyed an enemy weapon alone, who refused to die when the galaxy gave up on her. Her name became a symbol, whispered across outposts and camps, not as a legend, but as a reminder that sometimes leadership does not come with rank, it comes with action. Elira returned to her work, not as a commander, not as a hero, but as a medic. She walked into a small field station where wounded soldiers waited. Afraid and in pain, she picked up her kit, knelt beside a crying recruit and said quietly, "Breathe, you are going to be all right." The war would continue, but so would she, not for glory, not for revenge, but because someone had to stand when others fell. Someone had to lead when no one else would, and sometimes that someone was just the medic. The end.